Welcome to Redeeming Missions, an every home podcast where we explore the heart of what it means to carry Christ to our world. I'm Tanner Peak, and I'm so glad that you're joining me today.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Redeeming Missions podcast. It's a rainy day here in Vienna, Austria. I'm sitting with my friend Gabriel Kosmály. I've been trying to rehearse your last name here for the last couple of minutes. I hope I got that right.
Yeah, you did well.
Thank you for joining me. Thank you for being on the podcast. You're somebody that we've been looking forward to having a conversation with. You are articulate and brilliant. You live here. I'm sure you'll give in your introduction. You live here in Slovakia.
Yeah.
And you have a unique perspective into Europe. It's also important to say that you are Every Home for Christ leader over all of Eurasia, which really stretches from Ireland in the west all the way across Russia into the east. And so you have this huge aperture, this huge view of what's going on in the world. So, Gabriel, thank you.
You're building up expectations. So.
That's true. I'm hyping you up. Well, you know this, but we always start this podcast out with story, telling people story, having them share some of their story. Honestly, most of the time, this is the part that our listeners like the most, is just hearing about people's lives, who they are and how they came to be what they are today. And so would you mind let's just starting out by sharing some of your story?
Yeah. So I was born in Slovakia, which is east part of Europe, which is a neighbor to Austria, and on the east, it's a neighbor to Ukraine. And I was born to a typical normal family, Slovakian family. Slovakia is predominantly Catholic, or used to be. And so I was born to a father who was a Catholic believer, and to a mother who was a daughter of a communist official. My grandfather, one of my grandfathers, he really believed in the values and the system of communism. And that means also that my mother was brought up in a more atheistic setup and background. Not that she would really think about it, but it was that thing there. And but we were brought up as Catholics still. My mother didn't go to church, but we used to. And so over time, I used to get to go to church every Sunday and also to confessions. But as the puberty age comes, it's harder and harder. But I still knew somehow and understood that, or believed that there is God. And the problem came when my religion, or I understood from my religion that I should behave to a certain standard, a set of standards. And if not, I have to also, of course, go to confessions. And in the puberty and later years, it was always a little bit harder and harder. And I just remember one time when I was waiting on to the confession in front of the confessional booth, because obviously when there was Easter or Christmas, there were long rows and queues. And so I was waiting there, and over the confessional booth there was a cross with Jesus there. And I had plenty of time to really think about, like, what does that all mean? Like, why? What does Jesus on the cross have or has in common with me and my sins, and now me, my sins, confessing to the priest, and then the priest giving or ordering me some penance that I have to pray, and what does it have to do? How does it work? And it was my question, and now it feels silly because I would ask any of people, Christians I know, everybody would be just probably very much prepared to explain that. But in that time I asked, and I even knew some priests and people from the clergy. And usually what answer I got, it was like, oh, it's more complicated, like what I remember, at least what I remember. It's more complicated, it's deep, some things we are not meant to really understand, like conceptually. And I was puzzled, like, okay, but still we are here and he's there, so why? And many things happened, of course. And my over the time, but my faith journey was very much intertwined with my father's faith journey. We used to like go sit down on beers, and most of the time, 90% of what we talked about was theology and God and spiritual things.
Yes.
And he's a teacher, and he has students on high school. He teaches photography, and he had students who were also from the local Protestant denomination, evangelical church. And he told me that, hey, these guys are really different. When they talk, they also live what they talk. So my father took up the liberty or the quest to really like walk around we live in a small town, walk around all the Christian or the churches in our town to just see what is happening. And it was very un-Catholic from us that time, because it's not a common thing that you feel the liberty to do that. So he went, and over the time he really liked the preachings in that evangelical church, and he told me, hey, go there, maybe you will like it. First, we were just making fun of him with my mother, like, okay, some sect, I got you, or something like that. and I went there, and I really liked the preaching. It was so simple for me, like, do I understand the preaching? Do I like it? And what was funny that when I entered, I sat down, and immediately when I sat down, one gentleman, that time older gentleman, now he's a young man. At that time, older gentleman just shook my hand and introduced himself to me, asked me what I'm doing, and it was Andre Garay.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was just
which is a mutual friend of ours that we both love very much.
He was also continental director in Every Home for Christ. So immediately my journey went to him.
Wow.
And
I don't know if I knew that.
Yeah, but I still didn't understand things. And what was interesting, I already knew that there is something like being born again. There is something like different types of Christianity or belief. And I was even already praying for being born again. Because I was in a situation which was very much a dead end for me. I was really, I was even doing drugs, drinking quite a lot. I didn't have a purpose in life, and I was unable to really quit that circle of kind of despair, and so I still didn't understand and wanted. I knew that I want some change, but that change was still not really coming. And then one day, one friend, Chaba, was organizing a trip from Levice, where we live, to Budapest, capital of Hungary, to an evangelistic event, and it was Franklin Graham's evangelistic event in one big sport arena, and so we went there. And from the first time, from the beginning, Franklin Graham, what he did was I think great. He was announcing from the first time that at the end of this preaching or at the end of this talk, I will ask you to come and make your decision whether you will give your life to Christ and whether you want to be really born again. So he was giving people the chance to really think it over and not just be maybe overwhelmed with a sudden urge to decide. And from the first time I knew that, okay, this is my moment. I was like waiting for that moment. And so I went to the front, I prayed, and that time I really felt that I finally understand it. So I finally get it, and it was so clear to me. It was like, from this point of view, when I think about that moment, it was even like too simply clear to me. But I understand now, like from how I look at it, it was that I didn't really know it or understand the gospel, let's say, from the conceptual point of view, but from the experiential. I just understood it deeply. And I was there in the front, I was praying, then some local Christians came to me, talked to me, gathered my information. And I was for a long time there. People were already leaving, and then Chaba came to me, "Hey, Gabriel, we have to go. It's like 2 hours drive to back home." And I told him, like, "Chabi, I know, finally, we have to tell this to everybody, you know." And he told, "Yeah, I know. And I had this feeling that nobody can resist or nobody can turn down this very simple, even logical offer, let's say. And just over time, I understood that it's not always so simple, or you cannot make it simple by just explaining and articulating it well, but it became kind of my passion, how to explain the gospel, let's say. So that's the journey too.
That's your story is actually so beautiful. There's the people in there that are common that we know. I think I know Chaba as well. I knew Chaba. And so it's a beautiful, I think I've heard parts of your story before. It's beautiful to hear about the simplicity of that moment at the Franklin Graham conference. But I love your heart today to help explain, help an average person understand what that is, what it is that draws us to Christ.
Hey, you listen like someone who dreams big. At Every Home, our dream is to see Christ carried to everyone, everywhere. And now, you can sponsor specific gospel work in any of the 165 nations where Every Home has an active ministry. Provide motorcycles to help believers navigate the treacherous jungles of Nicaragua, disciple new believers in Papua New Guinea, or bring comfort and hope to those impacted by war in Europe. Where will your gift take you? Learn more at everyhome.org/give.
When you look at, you're European, obviously, and you have this perspective over Europe, and I think Europe is a place that most would maybe acknowledge that faith is complex. It has a complex legacy, has a complex story. Today, what does Christianity mean in Europe? And I know that's just an enormous question, but when you think of Christianity, or the average person in Europe thinks of Christianity, what are they thinking about? Or how are they seeing the faith?
Yeah. Of course, we both know that it's hard to talk about, or even we are unable to talk about average person in Europe. And as I understand it, this is my position or my observation that, when we talk about Europe, we can talk about the old Europe that was evangelized first, or we had this so-called Christendom in Europe, and even some people or some Christians still kind of look at that old pre-Enlightenment era of Christianity in Europe with some certain sentiment, as they were
like the Golden Age.
Yeah, like the Golden Age. Like, let's get back there, and I also seem like I see that sentiment as not too maybe fortunate, because it also is a sentiment, I think, towards the times when Christianity or your faith couldn't be really doubted,
That's right.
Like, you couldn't really ask. Like, you belong to this nation or to this group, therefore you are Christian or something like that. Okay, that was something, but we evolve. And what is interesting that probably everybody knows Christianity. Everybody knows the Christian language, the biblical Christian language, and already that language is being, or those words which we use to describe, let's say, gospel or gospel truth or biblical truth, that language is already being morphed. I think that the words lost their original meaning or oomph, or and
that's my kind of word.
Yeah, and you cannot use them anymore, hoping that they will do the same thing as they used to. Not to say probably that all the affairs or pitfalls of the church are understood and well known, you know, whether the Catholic, like for the secular person, they don't really distinguish between Catholic Church, Protestant churches, and,
Right,
and whatever.
right.
It's the church, or they don't even distinguish. My friends in Europe, let's say, they don't distinguish between Christianity, Christ, God, church. It's all one
It's
thing.
all one thing.
Also, and this whole package has that even that baggage with it. It carries that baggage of the abuses, sexual, spiritual, you know, and not to say the church's tendency to really like get into politics and power. Not get, it's still there very often, but so this is the visible, and I think people are kind of tired of this, and they don't really like, they think, or the secular society I think thinks that okay, we are already over this. It had its chance, it proved something, but it's no longer working. But when you look at the polls or consensus or data, what's interesting that, and I'm just not guessing, I'm just not citing exact numbers, but it goes like this. More than 40, 50, or in some nations even 60% of the people, when asked, they say, in Europe, when asked, they say they don't go to church, they don't believe in God, and they just don't have anything to do with Christianity. And it's also big numbers we have in Scandinavia, Czech Republic, in even France, and so on. Although less than 15% say that they are atheists. And now the
what
question...
was that? Say that number again?
Less than 15%.
Less than 15%.
Yeah. So there is a 40, 45, even 50% gap of people who say don't believe in God, while they don't say they are atheists. And when they asked what do they believe in, so you know, and there comes the whole thing of mixture of whatever on the spiritual market is, and people make up their own kind of belief. But okay, we could moralize like, okay, that's wrong, that's horrible. But I think that's the challenge for us. That's especially the challenge, but the challenge in a good way, I think, for us. And that means, I think we would agree with many of those people that we also do not believe in that kind of God which you don't believe.
That's
because
right.
when you even hear or read about objections of even the famous atheists like Dawkins and these kind of guys, when they describe like what do we believe in, what do they think we believe in, it's a very premature, anthropomorph, you know, naive kind of God, which we don't believe in really, but they get a picture that we somehow communicate that picture of God like over the time, consistently, and that's a problem, I think. So I think it's now our quest, our challenge, to somehow communicate, but in very humble way. It needs to be done in a humble way now, that God is different than what you think, and we don't know everything about God. We maybe even should be using some other word for some time, and He is much more, or even the He word it's already some describing, but let's say God is much more a mystery, much more something bigger and more vast than we think. And when people say that, like they refer to this being or this reality as a cosmos or space or universe, I kind of have some sympathy towards it, because what they I think are describing or think of is something much more bigger than we can even describe. And that's very fair, I think, to me. So
that's, I mean, there's so many parts of things that you said there that I think are profound. I think I want to talk a little bit about doubt. And you talked about we were talking about the golden age, in Europe, where faith was prevalent and Christianity had really taken hold and taken root across this continent. But you said one of the things that maybe was not as good in that time was that people didn't have the chance or the ability to doubt in the midst of that. They were almost controlled. They weren't able to think. They didn't have the agency to even choose God in a lot of ways. I wonder if you would speak more to that, especially, I think, specifically the younger generation in Europe who really wants today, who I think really wants the chance to doubt and needs the chance to doubt in order for their faith to mature, them to grow. Just anything that would come to your mind when you think of doubt in European context today.
I think one of the first things that we have to, we as Christians, when thinking of the relationship with these people, is that we have to abandon the position of some supremacy that we know, or
That's right.
we know the truth, we will tell you, or something like that. Because that moment, I think we lose the person, and I think it's very important to meet with the person on the same level.
Yeah.
Not that we would feel that we have to lower ourselves to the level,
Yeah.
because we are.
Yeah, that's kind of arrogant. Yeah.
Because we are on the same level, and when the person will feel at least that we are on the same level with them, and we are a metaphor, walking hand in hand towards some truth or towards some discovery. I think that's a very, very fair thing, and because people are seeking truth and deeper dimensions of life, I think, and also, I will come to that doubt, but I will go back to that language thing again. If we will still insist on using the old language, I mean, really the words, then I think we also can lose the people, because those words and that old language somehow is connected in people's minds, in secular society's mind, with that old thing that we want to get rid of, maybe. And we Christians have to realize, I think, that those words are just some kind of pointers to something that's beyond those words.
That's right.
And now the challenge is, can we use other words which are more current and relevant to understand with these people, which words will also refer to the same truth? I think yes. Some people insist on the wording, like, they insisted it was done like this, but I think we can and should. I think it's our obligation, it's our duty to search for new words, for new vocabulary. And what it does with us Christians as well is that it challenges us to really think beyond the words, because over time it always works like, okay, we have some notion, we use some word for it, but over time the word got worn out,
right?
And we over time just worship the word and not what is behind it. So we are challenged to find new vocabulary. That means we are challenged to again come back to those original meanings of those words.
That's right.
And when we come with a fresh vocabulary, Christianity, gospel, Christ, our true identity is as fresh as never. And people who doubt will seriously consider, I think, what we have to offer.
I think what you're saying really resonates with me. I think a lot of even what you're speaking of, I think European society, especially younger society, and American society have a lot in common right now. If you know anything about the U.S., there's this great move, this exodus of people away from the faith, or from the church is probably a better way of saying it. They don't want to identify with any particular faith. And I think it's something that I think about a lot. What is it that's going on in the minds of these individuals? And to be honest, at times I relate. I mean, because you look at the church in the US, or you look at the church even sometimes globally, And there's a lot of things that turn and point and to really be disgusted at.
Yeah.
And I can say that as a Christian myself, as someone who believes in the church, believes in the role of the church. There's just something about the way that the church has presented itself in the 21st century that I think is unattractive to a large group of people. In a lot of ways, I think they're just being honest. You know what I mean? I think that that group of nuns in the United States and similar to what you're talking about in Europe, it's a generation that really wants to be honest.
Yeah.
And they really want to search out for truth. They're really searching for truth.
Authentic.
Very authentic. And so then I think what you're talking about in language is so important. I imagine someone listening to this and our audience maybe dismissing that idea. Oh, what is wrong with people? I mean, can't they just use the old words? Why can't we say this? And I really resonate with what you're saying. I think that it's the task of every generation to retranslate the gospel into that context. And whether that's you're living in Papua New Guinea or you're living in Kansas in the United States or you're living in Slovakia, that's going to be a little bit different in every place. But I think we've done a disservice. Maybe we've done a disservice in the modern times by just assuming that we didn't have to translate it, that we could use language and concepts from the past to reach a very modern audience. And it's a very different time. We're living in a different time.
Yeah.
We're not living in the golden age of Christianity.
Yes. And we don't have to search for perfectly polished creeds that will finally establish on the top of the mountain that this is what we worship, the perfect, like this is it. And then we use it, right? But I think people need, even Christians and non-Christians as well. We are the same. In a way, we are the same group. We also need authenticity. We also need our faith to be alive. And because when we think about, like, I always come back to mission because I think from that perspective, when we are asking anybody to maybe the word will come back. Anybody to really think about our position, what we offer, we are asking that person to really doubt their current point of view or current sets of beliefs. And when we are asking, we are doing missions to other religions, for example, when a Christian is talking to a Muslim about Christ, that Christian also kind of hopes that the Muslim will reconsider at least also his standpoint, because that's what we are asking people to do. Then are we able or willing to reconsider ours as well? And I know that this is dangerous.
I love it.
How we can ask others to reconsider if we don't? And there's a beautiful saying which really helped in my life to do this. It's from Simone Weil, the French philosopher.
Yes.
And I can only just paraphrase it. And she says that Christ was truth before he was Christ. I would say before he was Jesus, but let's say before he was Christ. If you, and now the dangerous part comes, if you are willing to abandon Christ for the sake of searching for the truth, you will not go far away until you will fall into his arms again.
That's so beautiful.
And this is this little moment in your life when for the sake of truth, are you willing to doubt your current standpoints and sets of beliefs and theology and so on, you know? And I think people will see that in us if we are or are not. It's unconscious, it's hidden, but are you willing to meet with me at the same point?
I mean, what I hear you talking about is that actually doubt can be a gateway to faith. And I think that's really profound. I think of people in my life, you know, I have a great number of friends that are not Christian. They don't associate with Christianity. In fact, they're very resistant to Christianity. And their questions that they ask me oftentimes are in this vein. How can you be so sure I remember having a meal not so long ago with one of our best friends and just eating and just enjoying each other's fellowship. And they know what I do. I lead this huge international evangelism missions organization, and they think I'm crazy, but we're sitting at this table and they said, Tanner, how can you be so sure about your faith above all other faiths?
What do you say?
Yeah, well, I said, I'm not. That's truth.
Isn't that liberating?
Yeah, it was. I just said, hey, just to be honest, I'm going to be honest with you. This has been my experience. And this is where, and I ended up telling them some of my story. This is where Jesus arrived in my life and how he arrived in my life and what it meant to me and what it continues to mean to me. But there's times, I talk to them about, I still can't answer you the hard questions, like why does God allow suffering? These questions that I think tower in people's minds when they think about the Christian faith. And their answer, my friend's answer back was, thank you. Thank you for being honest with me. They had no problem with me actually choosing Christ. In fact, I think they could even see the veracity of Christ in that something of the truthfulness of my authentic encounter with Christ. They were more than happy to acknowledge that. But I think of the contrast, like what you're talking about, when we come with only certainty, and you say, God, we come out with this kind of classic line. It's like we have a script of how we answer these questions.
Like actors.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it feels like, I think. I think it feels inauthentic to people. And so I'm just still stuck on the idea that doubt is not a barrier to faith.
Of course.
It's actually maybe the bottom floor in a lot of ways of faith. It's what allows us to enter into the life of an experience of kind of the mystical life of faith in some way.
It's only one, I think it's a precursor or litmus test, or how to say, whether your faith is alive or not. If you are willing to doubt, that means your faith is alive and your faith is kind of strong. There is also one saying that sums it all up, I think, is that faith is not measured by the certainty of your answers, but by the courage of your questions.
Oh, I love that.
That's it, right?
That is. Yeah. I think our generation, I really believe they want to ask courageous questions. I really do. I don't believe that, all of the negative perceptions around, the young generation today and, they're backslidden or they're anti-God. I don't think that's true. I think they're just more committed to asking honest, authentic questions. And Christians are going to have to learn to translate. We're going to have to learn to, I think, accompany or to be alongside people as they ask their hard questions.
And change with them.
Yeah, grow with them. I'm going to ask you another question here in a second, but one of the things I would say is when you are asked questions, like the question I was asked over dinner, why are you so certain? It changes me too, as I have to try to answer that. There's something in me that grows along as well. I'm forced to empathize with the world in a new way. I'm forced to re-articulate in normal, language what is it about Christ that continues to draw me? So I think we grow in this process as well. Christians grow in the process as well. Let me finish up with asking you our kind of go-to question. We ask at the end of every podcast. We ask, what does the idea of carrying Christ mean to you? And I think especially based on the conversation that we've been having in the 21st century. Let's translate that terminology today into the 21st century Europe.
Yeah, Europe. That's important.
Yeah, it's the best. 21st century Europe. Yeah. What does it mean to carry Christ?
How I think if you would ask me this question maybe 5 years ago, I would have a different answer. 10 years ago as well. But now, currently, I think of it as helping people to understand who they truly are, helping people to discover their true identity. Yeah. But now I know that this may sound like, okay, whatever, true identity, psychological. But I mean, like, can I unpack this just a little bit? And I
Of course.
try to be fast. When we go to Genesis 1, what is, and try to find out what is a human being, essentially, we read that it's a, and I only know this from the Slovak Bible, so I'm translating it back to English.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So it's a breath of God in some biological mass, right? Like
Yeah.
clay or dust. So it's a breath of God in a biological form. And we should help to rediscover that breath of God in people's
Yes.
lives. Because over time, I believe that what is like how I understand the fall, that over time, people decided not to live from that from the breath of God, but they created some kind of their own God in the form so that, like, do you want to be like God? Yes. So we created some personas, some identities, some today's language calls it probably ego, some big one, and also these mystical Christians say that it is that false self, and it makes so much sense when I look at what Jesus was teaching, like something always has to die, and always he was using metaphors. A seed has to die in order to bring forth life. You have to die. He died in order to bring forth true life. You can gain the world, but you will lose your soul, and vice versa. So I think carrying Christ means helping people to understand and recognize that spark of God in them, so much so, to that extent at least, that they would understand, feel that, okay, this is worth searching for. And I'm willing to be dying, and I'm willing so that my false self, let's say, I'm going on the quest, and it will die because I somehow found or got the taste of the true self, of the true I am. And if that I am is the I am, the big I am, that's wonderful. You know?
That's a beautiful answer. I think helping people find their spark of God that's inside of them, that's amazing. Well, Gabriel, thanks for sharing a conversation, sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.
This is probably one of the deeper conversations that we've had on the podcast, where I think we're exploring deeper themes. So I'm grateful for the way that your journey has led you, even in the European context, how it's formed you to think deeply about things. Because I think it's important on a podcast like this that we actually have difficult, hard conversations and not just the easy conversations. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on the Redeeming Missions podcast. If you like what you heard, we encourage you to visit everyhome.org/redeemingmissions to find all past episodes and learn more about supporting the efforts of Every Home to carry Christ to everyone, everywhere, in every generation. Echoing the prayer of St. Patrick, Christ with us, Christ before us, Christ behind us, Christ in us. Let us carry Christ to our world. Until next time.